So it's January 19th. Trump is going to be president in about a day and a half. And there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of things shifting. And I just want to talk about some of my predictions here in terms of what a Trump presidency is going to look like. In a lot of ways, just like anybody else, I have no idea because, not only do things change rapidly in the course of the Biden administration, we didn't necessarily know that the Russia conflict was going to break out. We didn't know that the Gaza genocide was going to break out. And so these things happen, and then Trump is also a president who seems to accelerate those type of events, unprecedented or just surprising events. COVID-19 is just one example of that from during his first presidency. So I'm expecting a lot of that. The game is going to change in a lot of ways, and there's going to be a lot of things to shift your focus and pay attention to. I think early on going into this presidency, the thing we have to focus on is the immigration issue and these mass deportations. They are poised right now to essentially start right away with raids in places like Chicago. That's the word right now, is that these raids are going to start right off the bat. And so that's the number one thing I'm worried about, because in some ways, some of these shifts that are happening before Trump has even seen office are actually positives, it looks like right now, and we'll talk more about that later. But immigration, not only do I see that being sort of a lot of trouble on the horizon, I see dark things in the future when it comes to that, but they want to get started right away. They want to be aggressive. And essentially on day one, they want to start carrying out what they have characterized to be mass deportations. So what we have to keep our eye on is what exactly that ends up manifesting as. Because there's the possibility that Trump, does something that amounts to less than mass deportations, quote unquote, but still declares victory and says that he did it. So in a lot of ways, that's kind of the most likely outcome. That's sort of what happened with the wall last time. Except I would say that it seems like most of Trump's attention when it comes to domestic issues has been about setting up the conditions for him to carry out this vision of mass deportations. So supposedly it's going to start with a couple raids in high-profile cities. I guess he's starting in Chicago because Chicago is a place that has agreed to obey to his immigration demands. Some cities have not. California is not going to go along with a lot of this immigration enforcement, but Cincinnati, the mayor, just announced that he would. So there's definitely going to be political fights going on throughout the country in terms of what resources are and are not able to be used in what cities, and what consequences there are for those cities standing up to the administration. So that's one of the main things. And since we're seeing Chicago as one of the first target places, I imagine that's because they have the ability to operate there. And so they're going to start there. So it's going to be an early test case for what the rest of this is going to look like. And I think in terms of that specific instance, but then also this same thing could probably apply to a lot of these different instances of this immigration enforcement, is I see one of two possibilities. Either they do have the capacity to carry out these raids, mass roundups, essentially mass detentions and then mass deportations smoothly. They know how to use the resources to get that done. They're able to do it smoothly. They make it happen, and it happens in the blink of an eye. That's one possibility. The other possibility is that they are not competent or capable at using these tools, and so what they have on their hands is a mess. And And while there is a little bit of room in between those two things, I think that essentially it's going to be kind of on one end of the spectrum or the other. And so in those two cases, our job in terms of the response is different. Because if they're successfully able to carry out these mass detentions, very quickly we're going to start seeing images of what that looks like. And it's very important for us to seize on that right away and to take any images that we can find that are real, make sure they're real, but to spread images of what these promises of mass deportations look like. Because while he might be able to, carry out some raids in the city of Chicago quickly, doing this sort of like national wave of immigration enforcement and then detention and then deportation, that's not going to happen. You can't do that all at once. There's only so much faculty. So they're going to have to do it in this targeted way. And if there's not enough resistance initially to sort of prevent this, the imagery that this type of policy and use of essentially military forces, the images that that's going to produce are going to be images that can be used to mount public pressure against this type of immigration policy, including among some people that voted for Trump. And so if we can use the time that we have wisely while this immigration enforcement is happening, if we can convince more and more people chip away at the support that Trump has for these mass deportations, then that over time could prevent him and make it harder for him to use the resources that he needs in the various cities to make this as bad as it could possibly be. So it's going to be very important if these operations are successful, they round all these people up, they're putting them in whatever conditions they're putting them in, images of that are going to emerge and stories of that are going to emerge. And we have to use that to at least bear witness on the widest scale possible and make sure that people know right away that this is what this looks like. And especially if this happens immediately and we start seeing these images very soon into the Trump administration, it's going to be important to point out that this is what's happening right away, right off the bat. This is the change that people voted for. And, in the past, imagery like that on a wide scale, not so much on a targeted scale, but for imagery like that to be distributed on a wide scale, it does successfully erode the public support for certain U.S. policy in a way that makes it collapse. Vietnam is an example of this. Anytime images of what was happening in Iraq or Afghanistan, or those images of detainees being tortured in Guantanamo Bay, these type of things instantly shift the public opinion and they make the American government or the administration or whoever the bad guy. So the sooner that we can make that happen amongst as many Trump supporters as possible or Trump voters as possible, the better. The other possibility is that things don't go smoothly and it's a big mess and there's evidence all over the place that things didn't go as they planned and that they made many mistakes along the way. They weren't successful in detaining the people they wanted. People were tipped off because they knew what was happening ahead of time because people were talking about it, and so they didn't capture anybody. And in that case, it will be important for us to point out to people exactly that this is an incompetent administration and this was their main promise. And not only is it a horrific thing to do, but they can't even do it without exacerbating the pain of the process as much as possible and wasting as much public resources as possible. The best case scenario is for people who voted for Trump to view his use of the military and other government resources for immigration mass deportations as a waste of resources. That's what we want them to think of his immigration policy. So I don't know what's going to happen immediately when he gets into office, but I think it's probably going to be one of those two. It's either going to happen very fast and it's going to be very dark, or like most of the things that have happened in Trump's history and governance, it's going to be a giant shit show. So in some ways, that's the more likely option. Although, when you look at the amount of leverage that Trump has right now, and his willingness to use it even so far, to me, that's what makes me unsure of exactly how much he's going to be able to leverage this power once he's in office. I just don't know. I do remember very well what the last Trump administration was like. Maybe I remember it better than most people. But things do seem different this time, at very least in terms of the hand that Trump has to play. He's got a very good hand. He's got a ton of leverage right now. And so how he's going to use all of his leverage and how he is going to take advantage of the fact that many of the sort of rank and file people in government don't really know what's going to happen. And so how much of an iron fist is he going to be able to take over the federal government, or is it going to take time for him to create the type of pro-Trump bureaucracy that he wants to create at all of these various agencies, including immigration enforcement and that sort of thing. And so the other thing that's going on is TikTok is officially banned as of right now. And they are also making it very clear that Trump is the one who has been willing to negotiate with them on this. And so they're kind of publicly begging Trump and also attempting to hold him to his word, I guess, that he told them that he'd be willing to negotiate with them and figure out how to keep TikTok from being banned. So even when you go and open the TikTok app, at least in my case, what you get is an image of them saying, unfortunately, TikTok has been banned, but luckily, Donald Trump has given us his assurance that once he's in office, he will negotiate a deal to figure this out. So they're sending that message out as sort of like a default for anybody who opens the app. You know, this appeared on my screen when I opened my phone. This is a screenshot. So they're acknowledging how much leverage Trump has in this situation, and also that he has told them that he's willing to negotiate, but really the reason he's doing that is because he recognizes what a huge point of leverage TikTok is. If TikTok just goes away and Trump doesn't do anything about it, then it's just a done deal. It is what it is. People are going to be mad at the government either way because of it, and Trump will just move on to other things. But if he keeps the conversation open by saying he's going to figure out a way to negotiate to keep TikTok open, then basically it remains on the playing field as something that Trump could get credit for, that he could get concessions for, or that he could get a favorable outcome for, like TikTok being sold to Elon Musk, which appears to be a rumor that was floated sort of within the right-wing sphere of media, particularly to float that idea of Elon being the one that TikTok is sold to. There was also some AI company that wanted to fuse with TikTok. So, you know, just a number of nightmarish scenarios that could come out of this. But the important thing to remember, I think, is that Trump is going into this with a lot of leverage, maybe the most leverage that he'll have throughout his entire presidency. Because as he progresses into his presidency, there's going to be an understanding of what is important to Trump, what he's budging on, what he's not budging on, what his demands are, etc. But right now, there's not as much of a sense of that. People don't know how aggressive he's going to be on different things, or whether he's going to be open to negotiating on certain things. And so he holds all the leverage. And I think that's the position that he loves to be in. And I think the second he finds himself not in that position, he will probably start to spiral. And that's when we'll see people being fired and that sort of thing, which is what we saw last time. But I think as long as, you know, these lunatics that he has hired are able to seemingly keep things going and exercise Trump's leverage to a degree that he finds sufficient, But he just knows he's in a good position right now, so he doesn't have to do all of the bombastic stuff that he was doing going into his last administration. And so that's where I think, there's room to wonder what exactly he is going to do and how it's going to play out. The other question I have is how well these cronies that he's hired are actually going to be able to operate the U.S. government. Are they going to be able to start right away and do things that they wanted to do, or are they going to get gummed up in the works and sort of become, just like any other faceless bureaucrat? And that is, in many cases, what happened last time. Because a lot of these people, as much as they want to see themselves as like burn the system down, they get caught up in the same incentives and motives that cause these bureaucracies to be so complex in the first place. And so, in other words, a lot of them probably aren't going to be able to do the damage to these agencies that they want to do. But some of them will. So that's the other thing to keep an eye on, is how well his appointees are able to adjust to their new positions and how much resistance there seems to be to them getting done what they want to do. I would say that's most important in the intelligence communities, with Tulsi Gabbard, if she gets accepted, or whoever the fuck he puts on there. Kirsty Noem was also just saying that the Department of Homeland Security needs to work more closely with the CIA in order to essentially track Americans who have been radicalized. And since this is a Trump administration, we're talking about anyone who's left-wing. We're not talking about right-wing radicalization. So that's what his appointees are talking about in their Senate hearings about what they want to do in government. So, the question is, how fast-moving are these things going to be? These concentrations of power. How quickly is power going to concentrate in these various agencies and be able to be wielded by the Trump administration? That's what remains to be seen. But I think we all just need to hold on tight. I'm going to put some links for mutual aid related to immigration and some of these raids that are going on, so that hopefully we can just try to be prepared for these things as they come and respond accordingly.